The objective: to deliver the NBA to you like no other. News, play breakdowns, power rankings, storylines you never hear talked about anywhere else. It's all straight shots here, fired by straight shooters. S and Gunn. This is the Objective Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Objective Basketball Podcast. And holy shit. Yes, it was absolute mayhem on Wednesday night in the NBA playoffs. Maybe one of the best nights of the playoffs so far. Probably the best night of the playoffs so far. I mean, it was just absolutely insane. Lauren, before we get into it, how are you? How is everything going?
Things are good. Things are good. The weather here in Austin is wonderful. Winston is being quiet for now, so fingers crossed that will hold up. Things are good. How are you?
I need to know Winston's opinion about the Dallas Mavericks. That's the next guest we need to have on the podcast. Maybe we'll save our Dallas Mavericks talk for another day.
Yeah, maybe for another day.
Maybe we will invite ChatGPT to jump on and talk about the Dallas Mavericks.
Maybe we will
see what they think. So look, it was an insane day in the NBA playoffs. Maybe one of the biggest playoff upsets in NBA history, in the Milwaukee Bucks losing to the Miami Heat in 5 games. 5 freaking games. That is, by the way, the first time that has ever happened. A 1 seed being knocked out by an 8 seed in just 5 games. Mm-hmm. It's been 6 games before. It's been 7 games. It has never, since it's been a 7-game series, been 5 freaking games. Now there's extenuating circumstances to that. Giannis got hurt, right? Missed a couple of games. And yes, the Bucks won one of those games. But they completely collapsed in Game 4 and in Game 5 last night. Last night they gave up. They were up 16 points.
16, right? Yeah.
Going into the fourth quarter, and they fumbled the lead. Jimmy Butler was absolutely phenomenal. Gabe Vincent hit some really, really important and clutch shots as well. Bam Adebayo was wheeling and dealing. It was incredible to watch. The Miami Heat have now pulled off maybe the greatest upset in NBA playoff history, and there's so many angles to tackle on this that I honestly don't know which one you want to tackle first. So you tell me which do you want to go the Heat way? Do you want to go the Bucks way? Do you want to talk about Giannis quotes? Do you want to talk about Jimmy buckets?
Yeah.
There's just so many things we could do. So please tell me which angle you want to take first.
I do want to talk about the Bucks first, but first, before we get to the Bucks, I have to rewind to our trade deadline chatter when we were talking about the buyout candidates, and we were like, buyout candidates, they don't really make a difference. Like, whoop-de-doo. Yeah. Kevin Love is making a difference right now.
Love.
He is making, and we got to give him his flowers. So, got to give him the mention, but I think we should start with the Bucks.
On the same day, by the way, that his former team, the Cleveland Cavaliers, gets eliminated, Kevin Love is starting in a game to eliminate the number 1 seed. I'm just going to put that out there, ladies and gentlemen. I still think it was absolutely ridiculous that the Cavs just said, you know what, you can go home. Because you know who the Cavs could have used in that Knicks series? Maybe some veteran people. Maybe some veteran experience would have helped in that series. We will get to the Cavs in a second, okay? But there's so much when it comes to – I think we'll talk about the Heat in a bit, because the Heat still have playoff basketball to play against the New York Knicks, which has its own history and own craziness. Let's start on the Bucks. Way too many meltdowns in the fourth quarter, just abysmal decision-making between Giannis deciding to pass up the ball and a jump ball to just avoid free throws, to just say, I don't want this. I'm not built for this type of moment. Even though, let's move back to 2021. In Game 6 of the NBA Finals, he missed 1 free throw. He took 19 free throws and he missed 1. Okay?
That's crazy.
We know he's capable of that. And yet last night, he ends up missing. I'm going to go ahead and just double check so I don't skip over any missed free throws, because there were a lot, ladies and gentlemen. There were a lot of missed free throws. He missed. Where is this? He missed 13 free throws and he shot 23. He made 10 of 23 from the free throw line. If the Bucks, if Giannis made 2 more of those, they would win this game. That's it. That's all that was required of him. Obviously, that's going to be a huge part of this. He has to get better from the free throw line, but I don't think that was the big reason they lost. Yes, he deserves some of the blame for how this went, but awful decision making, awful coaching. I mean, the fact that there was yes, they made some sort of adjustments. They moved the guy, the weak side guy, a little bit closer to the nail so that Jimmy Butler doesn't get downhill a little bit easier. But overall, they weren't doing anything but Jimmy Butler defense. They weren't doubling him. They weren't showing two even. They were relying on Drew Holiday, and God bless his soul, Drew Holiday will be a first-team all-defense player this year, but he had no answers for Jimmy Butler in this series. None at all. Jimmy has been phenomenal in this series. I think playoff Jimmy is like a completely different character. I was just on a podcast right now, and I said, you've watched Harry Potter, right? Have you seen Harry Potter?
Of course. You
remember the first movie where he's fighting the guy and then he turns around and it's the face, right? The face That's is Jimmy. Playoff Jimmy. It's like it's a completely different person. It's not even he's taking over a body to just morph into something else. Playoff Jimmy is like a mythological creature. He's the Montar in the freaking in the hill that people don't believe exists. Like that is True. Really Jimmy Butler to you. He was incredible, every step of the way in terms of the shot making, the clutch shots, the clutch decisions. He was there. It was incredible. The other side of this is like the Bucks just choked in so many different ways. And Lauren, like we've started this pod this year, but I know both of us agree on this. Mike Budenholzer, right? The decision making that he has been criticized for before came back in one game. In one game, it embodied all of what people were criticizing Mike Budenholzer over. Lack of adjustments. He didn't focus on guarding Jimmy Butler. He didn't emphasize. He didn't even send double teams. He kept playing drop coverage against Jimmy Butler. Not calling the timeout in the fourth quarter, and then in overtime, still not calling the timeout. They had two. Lauren, please talk to me. Tell me what you think about any of this, because I'm still shocked. It's been 24 hours. It's almost 24 hours, and I'm still so shocked that this went down that way.
Yeah, I think I'm still kind of processing that entire game, because between blowing the 16-point lead and if you go down like the individual stats, or the team stats, if you go down the team stats and you look at the shooting splits, you look at the rebounding, you look at the turnovers, pretty much everything is the same except the free throws. Milwaukee shot 20 more free throws than the Miami Heat did, and they still lost this game. And I know we were talking about Giannis and how the blame isn't on him, and I don't think the blame is on him. And I actually think what he had to say post game in response to the questions was pretty phenomenal.
Amazing,
But the 7 turnovers from Giannis. We talk about these games and how every single possession obviously counts. Just every single thing is blown up. It just is so much more important. And so the 7 turnovers, the missed free throws, that all hurts. But I ultimately do think that the majority, if not almost all of this lackluster performance by the Milwaukee Bucks does fall on Mike Budenholzer. And I can't help but wonder what his future holds with the Milwaukee Bucks. There isn't a future.
There's no reason to wonder.
There's no way, right?
This podcast is not on Wondery. We ain't wondering. Okay, this is done. This is done. If they hadn't won the NBA championship in 2021, if he hadn't been the Bucks head coach for such a long time, they would have fired him 2 minutes after the game. That's how bad this performance was.
I completely agree. And the things that I'm always trying to pinpoint that you can't, they're very, very difficult to pinpoint from the outside. I try to, I don't want to say quantify, but watching kind of the behaviors and trying to, I guess, judge or assess the relationships and the things that are going to keep people around. Not saying that you can necessarily just look from the outside and understand everything that's going on, but these are all factors that end up resulting in people staying, that end up resulting in or contributing to the result of the following season and who leaves after because you underperformed or overperformed. So I completely agree that Giannis, that them winning in 2021 allowed Bud to keep his job and them continuing forward. But I do think it goes beyond Bud going forward. do you think that that's enough to shuffle the deck and then go forward and keep the same roster essentially the same? I know they got some decisions to make, but what is the path forward? And so I think it starts with a coaching change, but I do wonder if that's where it kind of ends, or even going back to a conversation that we have had in the past. Do they look to kind of continue to add more youth to this group, or do they try and go full on, you know, buyout candidates, older vets, not old, but like vets, and continue to, obviously they will continue to push for the championship, but I think that they have more questions right now than maybe some want to admit. And I think that that's the biggest thing going on right now in Milwaukee.
I did not expect us to have this type of conversation as the Toronto Maple Leafs just scored Morgan Riley. So let's go. Yeah, Leafs about to. Hey, listen, for the
Am
people
I becoming a Leafs fan?
No, you're not. Don't worry. You're a Dallas Stars fan.
I am. Go Stars,
okay?
go.
I have no affiliation. I just listen. I'm wearing blue. Whatever. Let's rock with it. Okay. Yes. The Leafs ended up scoring. Thanks, S. Yes, I got you. You're welcome, producer. Okay. As we were talking about the Milwaukee Bucks, I want to talk about the ages of these guys. Okay. Because Brook Lopez is a free agent this summer. He's 35 years old. Yes. He just had a Defensive Player of the Year candidacy. He didn't win Defensive Player of the Year, but like he was up there. He almost won the award, but he's still 35 years old. Joe Ingles, a guy they used off the bench, he was 35 years old. Drew Holiday is 32. He still has a contract left with this team. Jay Crowder, 32. Chris Middleton, 31. He's a free agent this summer. Pat Connaughton, even, who is just like a role player that they use. He's 30. Bobby Portis, he's 28. Giannis, 28. They do not have guys in their rotation that they can rely on, that they are in terms of guys that they can look forward to. Giannis is a 28-year-old player. He's in his prime. This is dead smack his prime. And he's going to continue to require more help. Just because as he gets older, yeah, his play is going to change. It's going to evolve. It's going to adapt. I'm not saying it's going to get worse, but he's going to change into a different type of player. It's like LeBron James when he went from the Miami Heat to the Cleveland Cavaliers. There are different requirements to the type of things that he needs on a basketball team. And I'm just not sure if Chris Middleton, at the age that he's at, with the injuries that he sustained over the last couple of years, and Brook Lopez at 35 years old, I'm just not sure how much more kicks at the can that they have. And when you look at, you mentioned the youth and if they could go into a youth movement, well, the question is how? How are you going to go into that youth movement? How are you going to convince yourself that you can develop a younger guy beside Giannis who needs to win now? Like, you don't have the time to develop. You need a guy who is ready right now. And so I wonder if there is a way for them to go out and get a guy who might be ready. I'm like, my question is, and you're on mute. So my question is, when it comes to, like, let's say Dame is a guy that interests me, right?
Sure.
His contract is not good. So maybe the Blazers, the value that they're getting back for him isn't as much as they think. We talked about this last week on the playoffs in the last podcast, but look, maybe Dame and Giannis is the way to go. I'm not saying that this is the solution. I'm just throwing out a name here, but you need a guy who can significantly change what this team is, significantly change and help Giannis in ways that he needs help in when it comes to, ball handling, when it comes to 3-point shooting, when it comes to playmaking, all these things Damian Lillard excels at. I'm just throwing that out as an example, but those are the type of players that you need. Let's say Shai Gilgeous-Alexander ends up on the market, and it's like, okay, how do you pair Shai with those guys? They don't have the assets to do any of these things. I'm saying this truthfully because I don't see a world where Chris Middleton or Drew Holiday, or even if a package of those guys goes out and gets you a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, or even a Trae Young for this matter. So I'm curious because they are in an impossible situation. And with the new CBA, with it being even harder to be a repeat tax offender, which they are, I'm starting to question whether Giannis is going to be there long term. We're there. We are there now.
Yeah.
And it's tough because you just had an embarrassing loss. And you're about to lose your coach, the coach that Giannis has been under for the last 5 seasons. How are you going to change this to make it better? And also, let's remember, this is a new ownership group now. They sold the team. New ownership group. It's changed up.
Yeah.
It's not the same faces in the locker room with Giannis anymore. And now if you start to now it's like a Jenga game, right? You start to take out Chris Middleton. Okay, now you start to take out Brook Lopez. Foundation is starting to get wobbly.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to start asking yourself, what's that next thing?
Yeah.
How do you look forward to? And that's my question.
Where to begin?
When it comes to the Bucks.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that I think is really important is that sometimes when we talk about getting younger or trying to go out and find youth, I think a lot of people are quick to think, okay, we got to go find the guys that are 22, 23, 24 that are going to explode going into 25, 26, 27. Whereas for Giannis, like he's 28 right now, and I mean, very much in the middle of his prime, who even knows when it's going to end. I don't believe that they need to hit on the 23, 24, 25. I think that they can do kind of similar what they did with Drew Holiday, hit on the guys that have been around, but then kind of hit another. I don't want to use the term catch a second wind, but even like CJ McCollum, I think is another great example of a guy who's right around 30, not too far into 30, but hovering right around 30. And you can bring in and then add a lot to your group.
It's sort of what the Kings did with Sabonis.
Absolutely. Another great example.
Halliburton is a guy who's developing, and he's going to be an all-star in this league for a very long time, but the Kings needed something that was now.
Right.
And Sabonis was that now. They needed, like, I think Sabonis is 27, maybe 26 or 27 years old.
Yes.
Last I checked, he was 26. So he shouldn't be too much younger than Giannis is. I'm not saying they can go out and get Sabonis, guys. I'm just saying, for an example, you need a guy of that, for the Raptors fans listening, and I don't think this is possible, but a guy like Pascal Siakam would help right now a lot.
Yeah,
he's 29 years old. He's ready to compete. He's ready to win, try to compete for an NBA championship. The fit might not be great with him and Giannis, but yes, that's the age, that's the trajectory, that's the type of player that you're looking for to pair with Giannis. Finding that, though, very hard. Very hard.
Yeah, it is going to be difficult for them. As I'm kind of looking around at who's available or who could become available, I mean, Milwaukee just doesn't have a ton of draft assets, and they don't have a ton of young guys to really deal in trying to bring someone back. So when we're talking about some of these names that might come available, we should start by saying they have that number one. They have Giannis. They don't need to go out and get the Trae Young, the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That's out of their price range. That's just a fact. But they can go get the guys that are right around that sweet spot around 30 that maybe are not on a favorable contract, maybe do have some injury history. And while that is a gamble, I do think that that's kind of the situation and the reality that you find yourself in when you don't have the young guys, when you don't have the draft assets. There are plenty of teams around the league that we have seen that happen to. And I think Milwaukee, luckily they do have assets that they can deal. I just don't know that they're going to get a ton of draft assets in return that they could potentially flip for someone like a Damian Lillard. I think somebody more in like the Zach LaVine price range with the question marks there, the contract, even the injury history, kind of going there, or not to even stay consistent with Chicago, but maybe even get lucky. And I don't even want to go down this route, but like a Lonzo Ball situation where they try and take a swing somewhere and maybe it pans out. Maybe they get a juiced up version of like an asset that isn't an asset, like in the sense like Malik Monk, you put him in Sacramento and bam, look at what he's doing for them. I think Milwaukee needs to go out and find the guys that are reasonably attainable, that can fit in their system, and that they truly believe could provide more in a Milwaukee uniform than what they're providing somewhere else.
I will say, I know that the Bucks had interest in Fred VanVleet at the trade deadline. They tried to get him. They tried to acquire him. That was reported. I'm not just, this is not new news that I'm breaking. It was reported that they tried to offer the 2029 first round pick plus Grayson Allen plus draft assets and whatnot and salary in order to go get Fred VanVleet.
Be interesting.
That's also a type of guy, right? That's kind of right on the money, actually. Yeah, like his injuries, like he doesn't look that great, like etc. But hey, maybe he fits better against thing. And I know we're talking off-season talk right now. Let's get back to the playoffs because it is playoffs, ladies and gentlemen. Get in the game and make your next bet with Sports Interaction. Bet before the game or live and play on all your favorite teams' matchups. Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN or download the app to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly. So look, speaking of the playoffs and maybe dipping into a little bit of the offseason here, the New York Knicks are now moving on. They've won their first playoff series since 2013. You know, we talked about it last week with Raymond Felton and Carmelo Anthony and Tyson Chandler and all those guys. They're going to face the Miami Heat. We can talk about them for a second too, but it's just insane to me that the Cavs look lost in the wind in the playoffs. I mean, I loved that Cavs team throughout the year. They were one of my favorite watches. Donovan Mitchell is probably going to be, first team all NBA player or maybe a second team all NBA player. Regardless, he's going to be an all NBA player. Darius Garland was amazing. Evan Mobley ended up being third in defensive player of the year voting. Like there's a lot to be looking forward to if you're this Cavs team. And yet they're they're not in a similar situation to Milwaukee in terms of age because they're so much younger than those guys. And you can bank on internal development much more than you can with Milwaukee. You can't say that Chris Middleton is going to get any better than he is right now, or Drew Holiday is going to get any better, or Brooke. But you can say, hey, next year, Evan Mobley's going to get better. Maybe even Darius Garland gets a little bit better. Donovan Mitchell will learn to work with these guys a little bit more. Maybe we can bank on Isaac Okoro getting better. Maybe Jared Allen even gets better, right? That you can look at this and tangibly say we can look forward to our next season. But there's also another side to this where they're limited asset wise. They don't have much to move around. And on top of that, they don't have depth. They don't have money to be able to pay a guy in the in the offseason to be able to go and get that depth either. So my question is, like, what does this Cavs summer look like? Do they look at shaking things up, or do you think they're more conservative and just kind of run it back next season?
Similar to the Bucks, I wonder how serious the conversation around the coaching change is, because JB Bickerstaff, just what was it, last year that we were talking about the incredible season that he had and what he was doing
Coach
with
of the year, yeah.
the versatile lineups that included Lauri Markkanen, the big lineups, the small lineups, all of it. So
yep.
I'm curious as to how much there is to those conversations. Just what's going on there. That to me is kind of the first step. But as far as this team right now, I think you have to bank on the internal development. I don't think that necessarily blowing it up is the right move right now. They have a decent treasure trove of second round picks, and we just saw what a bunch of second round picks can get you. So
That's true.
do think when we talk about their lack of depth and how maybe expecting more of some of the bench producers on this team, how they kind of fell short, and even losing Kevin Love, how that impacted this group in a playoff series. I mean, I think you at least have to give them another shot and see what you can do starting the year with Donovan, or with this group as constructed right now. Starting with them, you add at the trade deadline, buyout market, whatever you can get going, and kind of go from there. I don't think that they should be quick to move a Jared Allen or move anyone else, or like the only one that I can even realistically see getting moved is Karis LeVert, but that is, again, another conversation for the offseason, given his contract. So now, I think the key will be to keep the group together. And as far as the coaching goes, that's kind of up in the air to me right now. And just see what hangs out there kind of around trade deadline, because things have a way of kind of just popping up to the surface.
I will say, I think you're probably right in the sense that we don't want to rush to any kind of conclusion with the Cavs. I think they will be more conservative. I think they'll like the Nick Nurse situation makes it a little bit more tantalizing for a team that has flamed out, because now you're like, okay, this is a really good coach that's on the open market, and maybe we have a chance at this good coach. Maybe he likes our situation. I think that's why this Bud situation is more heightened, because you're like, whoa, Nick Nurse is just chilling there. He's ready to jump on. And I mean, maybe he isn't. We don't know what Nick Nurse's situation is, but we're assuming that he wants to coach again. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes this whole coaching carousel thing a little bit more interesting, because now you're like, okay, JB Bickerstaff, I don't think he should be fired, but maybe they consider it now because of Nurse. So
yeah, that's a really, really good point.
Who knows? I have no idea. We'll see what happens with the Cavs in the offseason. We have a summer to talk about what happens to the Cavs in the offseason. I want to look ahead and, kind of dissect what might happen in the conference semifinals, or as most people call it, the second round of the NBA playoffs. I want to talk about Knicks Heat first. Okay. Massive storied rivalry. If you haven't, we talked to Chris Herring on the pod a couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks ago. He had written a book about the New York Knicks in the 90s. You should absolutely go and read that book if you'd like to. If you don't have time to read the book, read it later. But also you should go ahead and watch a bunch of these YouTube videos. I went through it this morning and just watched a crap ton of these videos. Pat Riley, why he left the Knicks as head coach, went to end up going to Miami, and he's been in Miami ever since. He has, embraced that like his second home. And now, it's funny because in 1999, when the Knicks upset the Heat as the 1-8, which is funny because now the Heat are the ones who upset the 1-8, it was Rick Brunson, who was Jalen Brunson's dad, was on that Knicks team, and Tom Thibodeau was the assistant coach of that Knicks team. And now you have Tom Thibodeau as the head coach against the Miami Heat, who he has a big, connection with Jimmy Butler, who's the star of the Miami Heat. And you have Rick Brunson, whose son, Jalen Brunson, is the star of the New York Knicks. There is so many interlaced connections between these two franchises that it heightens whatever basketball is about to be played. I know, some people hate to dive into the narratives and whatnot, but, here at the Objective Basketball Podcast, we got to talk about everything, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be an awesome series, even though the basketball might be grueling. The scores might be very low. It might be like 89, 90 type of games.
I fear that's what we're in for sure.
But I want to know, because I personally didn't expect this to be the second round series. I had Bucks Cavs. And I think I'll say this right now to any Knicks fans who are listening. I apologize because I severely underestimated Mitchell Robinson. Severely.
Yeah, he's been incredible.
Absolutely severely underestimated him. And now, to be fair, I probably overestimated Evan Mobley and Jared Allen a little bit as well. But I think the Knicks just look incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I think they have a really good chance of making their first conference final since 2000. So where do you lean on this? Where do you lean on this? Where do you lean on this? Because I don't know. Because my mind is telling me, look, Jimmy is averaging. Let me go. I have it right here. Jimmy is averaging 37 points on 60% from the field, 44% from three, 70% from the line, 6 assists, 6 rebounds. He's doing everything. Literally, he's leading the playoffs in points per game. Absolutely insane, right? Who knows if he can keep up this type of production? But I mean, he's been insane, a superstar, a supernova type of star. But then again, the Knicks just are the better team. They have a well-trusted system. They have the depth. Miami's depth isn't as good as New York's. The coaching, you would lean in favor of Miami. Spoelstra is just the better coach. He maybe is the best coach in the NBA. So I ask you again, where the hell do you lean? Where are we going?
God, this is a hard one. It's hard. I'm going to start by saying I lean Knicks. And I don't want to discount playoff Jimmy. I really don't. And honestly, if Miami does it, I will happily say, "Oh, I was wrong." I wouldn't
be surprised if
I wouldn't be surprised either. I wouldn't. I will say a big question mark is that Julius Randle ankle. What's going to go? How is that going to sideline him at all? Limit him in any sort of way? I do have questions about that, but I too underestimated Mitchell Robinson. He was one of my question marks going into not just the first round, but the playoffs as a whole. How engaged was he going to be? Every now and then you see a tweet of, "Oh, Mitchell Robinson is liking these tweets." So that was one of the questions that I had. Very small thing, but just in terms of engagement, a playoff environment, things that can present cracks in the foundation sometimes. Something as small as that. So he was one of my questions, and he has completely proven me wrong and answered those questions very strongly. And so the reason I lean Knicks is because every time I watch them, they all seem to be on board and completely locked in to what their mission is. And that was something that I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to do. RJ Barrett is another one who I was like, is he ready for this moment? Is he truly ready for the trajectory that the Knicks find themselves at right now? And he looks like he is. They all look on board. I think bringing in, again, Josh Hart was a big kind of contributing factor to just establishing their identity, even though they had already established their identity. So for all of those reasons, I kind of lean Knicks because I'm buying in. I'm buying in to what they're selling. So you said the buy-in and you said the fact that they're all on the same page. And honestly, you could kind of say the same thing about the Miami Heat. You absolutely, because they everybody else is bought in, it's next man up. Tyler Hero went down with an injury. Victor Oladipo stepped up. Victor Oladipo went down with an injury. Now it's Gabe Vincent and Haywood Highsmith and those guys are contributing at a higher level. So I don't know. It's tough.
I can go ahead and break down Suns Nuggets for you. We're going to in a second. I can probably even preview Lakers Warriors because that's probably what I assume is going to happen. We can talk about Celtics versus we can talk about Celtics versus Sixers, and I could probably break down for that for you in depth. But because of the rareness of this type of situation where you have an 8 seed who has all the momentum, they're feeling good about themselves. Jimmy Butler is the best, performer in the playoffs. And then you have this other team, which is the Knicks, who are finally looking good. They finally have something foundational. I wrote about this. I made a video about it earlier about how Jalen Brunson has helped create that foundation. They're going to be a playoff team for a really long time now. I don't know which way to go. I think I'm with you. I lean Knicks. I trust in the foundation that the Knicks have built this year. I trust in the ways that New York can do this because Jalen Brunson, great isolation player. He absolutely carved up the Cavaliers. I think he will have a little bit more trouble doing that against the Heat point of attack defenders, especially if Jimmy Butler ends up guarding him, especially if you have maybe even Gabe Vincent, who's a good defender, Kyle Lowry, who at times can be a good defender, depending on how healthy he is. So there's going to be new wrinkles that Miami can throw at New York. The zone defense is going to be a very interesting thing because Miami could throw out a ton of zone against the Knicks. And how are the Knicks going to be able to shoot in this situation? That's going to be huge. But also, I think back to the Hawks Heat playing game. If you remember the Hawks Heat playing game, the Hawks absolutely dominated the Heat on the offensive glass. Clint Capella grabbed 20 plus rebounds. John Collins grabbed a bunch of offensive boards. I believe DeAndre Hunter did the same. They absolutely demolished the Heat when it came to the rebounding battle. The Bucks did the same, but the Bucks didn't have the advantage of the crazy shooting that Miami has had. Miami is shooting 20% better from the 3-point line than they did throughout the season. They were like bottom 10 in 3-point shooting throughout the year, and now they would be number 1 by a wide margin. They're shooting over 50%. I got to go double check that, but they're shooting incredible numbers from 3. Let me just double check. Yeah, they're shooting 45% from 3. 45% from 3 in these playoffs. Yes, it's a small sample size and all that stuff, but I think there's more questions on the validity of how Miami can do this sustainably. If they can hit their 3-point shots consistently, if this streaky shooting stays, then I think I would lean Miami. But in terms of foundation, in terms of what they have consistently, in terms of what I can rely on more, I would lean New York. So I'm going to say New York. That's the way I would pick it.
Yeah, I think right now I'm having more faith in the bench of the Knicks, and that is why, like when we're talking about the next man up, the guy stepping up in Miami, it's true, but you got Josh Hart, you got Emmanuel Quickley, you just have guys over in New York that I just trust more. And again, if Miami proves me wrong, it's going to be an incredible story. And I mean, then all bets are off. I have no idea how to predict the Miami Heat after that. Duncan Robinson, I do also have to give him his flowers. Something that my brother drew attention to, that I was like, oh, I didn't realize how little Duncan Robinson was playing in the regular season and how inconsistent his role was. I didn't realize to the degree that how inconsistent it was. And now the 3-point shooting, something that they've needed, greatly improving, and he's playing a lot of minutes. So when we're talking about the next guy stepping up, he's done a phenomenal job, and I do wonder how big of a part he's going to play in this next series.
I agree with you. Suns Nuggets over to the Western Conference. We'll see what happens with Knicks Heat. It's going to be awesome, but equally as awesome, maybe even more awesome, will be Suns Nuggets. I think it'll be a great series. I think it'll be the exact opposite. You could probably see a lot of low scoring games in Knicks Heat. I think you will see 130, 135, 130 when it comes to Suns Nuggets. It's just going to be an offensive, showcase. It's going to be unreal. We've both been adamant about this, but I'm very adamant about this. I do not trust the Suns' depth.
Yeah.
I think Devin Booker has been incredible. He's been the second best player in the playoffs, as Jimmy Butler is number 1. Kevin Durant is still Kevin Durant, and he can go off anytime he wants to. You obviously still have Chris Paul. You obviously have DeAndre Ayton. I just don't know how those transitional lineups will work. And let's say they do not go to those transitional lineups as much. Let's say they stick to their starters more like they did in the Clippers series, where they play 44 minutes, 45 minutes a game. I question how that looks against a better opponent, because the Nuggets are a better opponent than the Clippers. And I question how that looks in a 7-game series, because I think this series does go 7. And I trust, like, sort of like Knicks Heat, I trust the foundation there in Denver a little bit more. They have more depth. They have guys they can rely on. They also have home court advantage. I would lean Nuggets, and I think Nuggets in 7 is what I'm saying. And I hate picking in 7 because now I'm flip-flopping here, because it's like, it's the cop-out answer, because I'm not saying one team is going to definitively win or not. I think I could also be bought into Suns in 6. I think if KD and Booker are doing what they have to, I could believe that the Suns could manhandle them. And that's just because the Suns have the basketball on court advantage. They just look, they are the type of team that is perfectly built to beat the Nuggets, in the sense that they are a mid-range team. They have a lot of pull-up shooting. They can, if they play Jokic and drop, then they can expose that very quickly. If Jokic is going to, be higher up on the screen, or if he's going to hedge, then they have the quickness off the ball that can expose that. So I think there are a lot of ways that Phoenix can win this series, but I just rely on the foundation, and I don't trust the depth of the Suns to be able to pull it through. So I'm going to say Nuggets in 7. How do you feel about that?
I also lean Nuggets. I am curious if the Nuggets are going to get to a point where they're fueled by so much momentum that they are able to do it in less than 6. And I want to say that if the Suns come out of this series, I'm not going to be surprised. That I feel that way as well. I also feel that the first round, the Clippers Suns, was not a true test for the Suns. And so I kind of am, there's a lot of confidence that I felt would have been established if that had been kind of a lengthy, tough, grueling series, but it wasn't. And so now they find themselves going against like you mentioned, a team that has a lot of chemistry, a lot of continuity, and a lot of talent. And so I'm curious how they're going to match up against this. And every single game that the Phoenix Suns play, more miles on those tires for these guys. And so I am wondering if that's going to play a role, if we're going to be able to see it, how they're going to guard Memphis, or I almost said Memphis, yikes, Denver, how that's going to work for them. And so I'm curious what we're going to see in game 1 and what the kind of obvious adjustments going into game 2, no matter what happens in game 1 for each team, what that's going to look like. I'm curious about the mid-range scoring for Phoenix and how lethal that is going to be for Denver. But right now, I'm a big believer in continuity. I'm a big believer in chemistry. And I mean, for all the conversations that we've had about the Phoenix Suns, as talented as they are, there are some big, big questions. So I can't have a lot of confidence in that.
I think this is a very, very big DeAndre Ayton series.
I agree.
Ayton, if the Suns can be comfortable enough to keep Ayton in single coverage with Jokic, that means they let him guard him one-on-one, mano-a-mano, right? Then you're not sending help. Then you're not sending double teams to Jokic. And that is the way the Nuggets offense works. You can't guard Jokic in one-on-one coverage, so then the team has to send help, and now Jokic's playmaking is opened up. He can find Jamal Murray, he can find Michael Porter Jr., he can find Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That's what the Nuggets are based off. That is all they are based off. The foundation of what they do is that. So if Ayton can guard him in single coverage, if he can do a good job, if he can force Jokic to be a scorer versus a playmaker, now things get a little bit interesting for the Nuggets, because now there's more pressure on Jamal Murray. Now there's more pressure on Michael Porter Jr. to create their own shots. And that's where it gets tricky for Denver. So I could totally see Phoenix winning this series. I could totally see
me too.
It. But
so much talent there.
I just think I trust what the Nuggets are doing a little bit more. And that seems crazy to say, given how bad they looked the last month of the regular season. It does. And it's not like the Timberwolves were world beaters anyways,
Right.
I still think I lean Nuggets. Now, we've talked about the 2 set series. We will see what happens with Boston and Atlanta tonight. By the time you guys listen to this, it will be decided. More than likely, it will probably be Boston versus Philly. More than likely. Yeah, I guess, like, really quickly, how do you feel about that series if it were to go down? The Embiid injury is the huge part about this.
Right.
But like,
oh, man.
Do you give Philly any chance?
Of course.
Yeah?
Of course. I give him a chance. if Embiid is available, I give them a chance.
Right.
But I'm intrigued by the like from a personnel standpoint, the matchup is like what's going to cancel out the other, you know what I mean? And which is going to carry more weight. And so I think it would be a good series, but I mean, the Celtics I think are more built for the moment. That would be the series that I'm like, okay, we're really about to see it with Doc. We're really about to see. And I mean, one, that would make for some good Twitter, some good NBA Twitter moments, but I would still lean Celtics in that series. I think the matchup would be more favorable for them, but I would be curious to see how ready does Philly feel for this moment? Because we've been talking about it this entire season. This is their moment. This is their season. Everything is in their back pocket. Like everything is ready for them. Yeah. So can they execute? And that I think would be the ultimate test. And I think if they get past Boston, assuming it's Boston, then I think they feel pretty good about their odds to take the whole thing home. I think that gives them a huge confidence boost, but I don't know that I feel 100% confident that I could trust them to execute that. I just don't know that I could do that, even though they have the MVP on their team, you know.
If you were to ask me a week ago, I would say that Philly has no chance. I say that truly. I say that mostly because of how Boston looked in that Hawk series, but then they went ahead and fumbled the bag at home against the Hawks, and Trae Young went off against them, and they absolutely got demolished, and they had another fourth quarter collapse, and it didn't look good at all, right?
Yeah.
And it makes me wary. It makes me wary about Boston closing out games. And it's funny because I don't really trust Philadelphia to close out games either. So I think the thing is, which team is going to get in its own way less? In terms of how are they going to get into their offensive process? Are they going to be good with their shot selection? Are they going to defensively be ready to match up, be able to bend and not break when it comes to their defensive matchups? I think a lot of that stuff really depends on coaching, but at the same time, it also depends on health. If Embiid is healthy, this thing completely changes, and it's a different story. So I don't know. If I had to pick right now, I think I would still say Boston, but I'm not as confident in that as I was a week ago. So that's the way I lean.
I feel you there. What are you going to do if Atlanta pushes this to 7? I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no idea what I'm going to do.
I'll tell you this. I guarantee you if that happens, the Sixers are celebrating, because that just means the series gets extended, Embiid gets more rest. There's more likely, there's more of a chance that Embiid ends up playing and maybe even being more healthy in playing in the series. So, I mean, it would be crazy.
It would be crazy.
It would be crazy. Crazier things have happened. I would be very surprised if that ends up happening. But who knows, man? The Hawks have done crazier things. They have done, especially Trae Young in the playoffs has done crazier things. We've seen it. We've seen it firsthand. So who knows? I don't know. Hey, you will probably get an emergency reaction pod from us if that ends up happening.
I would die. Truly die.
How do you feel about the Kings Warriors Game 6 and Lakers Grizzlies Game 6? Do you think that these series end up finishing? Do you think that we're getting a Game 7 in any of these scenarios?
It really pains me because I did pick Kings in 7.
You did,
but I do think that you were right, that the Warriors have the Kings figured out, and that they're going to win the next 2, and that they're going to move on. So I do have to give you, the credit. As much as it pains me, God, it pains me so much.
Hey, it pains me too. I would have. Look, the Kings have had an incredible season. It was awesome, and I'm not trying to eulogize them already because we can do that on Monday.
Right.
But they have been figured out, and I think the Fox injury adds a little bit more of a wrinkle to it because they don't look like, they've kind of exerted all their options. Sacramento has, and the Warriors, they pulled out a very signature Warriors road win on Game 5. And I don't expect them to look back. I think really, I doubt it'll be like a blowout in Game 6, but I do think that they will handedly win that game. And it'll be one of those things where they're like, let's just get this over with. I could see that happening with the Warriors. It sucks, man. We'll talk about Sacramento once they lose, because I feel like, they've had an incredible season. They really have. And like the future is bright. They'll be good. They'll figure it out. They've had some great performances. They have some questions, but yes, like overall, very positive. Sacramento, regardless of what happens in the series, you have won. You have shown that you can hang. You can stick around. You were here. You're good. Lakers Grizzlies, I'm less optimistic about them closing it out in 6.
Interesting.
I think a game 4 in LA, Ja and Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. figured something out. I think in game 5, they relayed that. And I think momentum is on their side because Desmond Bane looks incredible. He's looked incredible for the past 2 games. Ja Morant looks a little bit better. His hand looks a little bit more comfortable. Jaren has been great. The Grizzlies look great. And the Lakers are just so inconsistent. I think that's the one takeaway I have from this series is that you don't know which Lakers team you're getting on any given night.
Yeah,
and if we're gonna look ahead to like a potential Lakers Warriors series, that is why I have the Warriors beating the Lakers in maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because I think there's so much inconsistency to this Lakers team. I mean, even LeBron himself has been on a game, off a game, on a game, off a game. AD has been on a game, off a game, on a game, off a game. They're clearly not 100% healthy. They are pushing through this to try to make it as far as possible. But I think there's a pretty good chance that the Grizzlies push to game 7. I wouldn't be surprised if we sit here on Monday and say, hey, Warriors, Lakers, let's do this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think the Grizzlies have gained a little bit of momentum here. They look like the 2nd seed. That's what they look like in game 5. So I don't know. I think right now, if I had to pick right now, I think the Grizz end up winning in game 6 and then they force game 7 and, Jesus take the wheel. Who knows? But
Jesus take the wheel. I like it. God, yeah, I that's what I struggle with, because by the time playoffs roll around, you should be consistent. We should have an idea of who you are. And I don't feel that way about the Los Angeles Lakers. And so we've talked about what they can look like when Anthony Davis is their best player. And we've seen what they can look like when they are just firing on all cylinders. But I don't know. Like you said it best, you don't know what you're getting on any given night. And so because of that, I can't necessarily reasonably predict what is going to happen tomorrow night when they face off again. And so I would like to say, I think for entertainment's sake, I think because Memphis is the one building momentum right now, I do think that they are going to be able to tie it up 3-3, push to 7.
Wow.
But
pretty crazy, man.
I feel, at the same time, I feel in my bones that we're getting a Lakers Warriors. I feel it. I just feel it coming. So I guess we'll see. We will see what happens, Lauren. It's going to be a crazy final couple of days of the first round of the playoffs. I'm excited for round 2. I mean, if you think about the grand scheme of round 2, you have Knicks Heat, big markets. You have Celtics Sixers, big markets. Suns Nuggets, maybe not the biggest of markets, but Phoenix is a big market. Denver has a great team. And then there's the potential of Lakers Warriors, which is like 2 of the biggest markets. And, they could be the eyeballs that will be on this NBA playoffs could be some of the most that we've seen in terms of numbers, in terms of viewership. We already saw with Kings Warriors, they were breaking records for viewership. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be great. It's been an amazing playoff run so far. I've loved every second of it. Every night I'm removing my responsibilities because of how much I'm enjoying watching these playoffs. Like my friends want to hang out and I'm like, no, thank you. Busy.
I'm trying to watch playoffs. Yeah. Like I am busy watching basketball and I love it. It's great. It's amazing. Folks, thank you so much for listening to the Objective Basketball Podcast. Do the things you guys do. Like, subscribe, comment, rate if you guys will. We will be back next week. Maybe a little bit later than usual in the week. I'm headed to Michigan to interview for the Pistons head coach job. No, I'm just kidding.
I was like, whoa.
No, I'm headed there for a wedding, but we will do this. We will see you guys next week for the Objective Basketball Podcast. And as always, peace.
Follow hosts at Just S Baraheni on all socials and at The Lauren Gunn on Twitter. The Objective Basketball Podcast, delivering the NBA to you like no